welcome to Post Games, a podcast about why and how we love video games. I am your host, Chris Plant, and I am so happy to have you here as we enter the most treacherous season of the year, GOTY season. Yes, Game of the Year season is here, when professional game critics and passionate enthusiasts divide into ravenous micro-fandoms determined to prove that their favorite 19th century Ireland set murder mystery deduction game is objectively superior to a multiplayer military shooter in which you destroy large parts of New York City. And you might wonder, who would dare to release a video game into this pell-mell? Well, you're about to find out. This episode of Post Games is a bit unusual because I am chatting with a talented game developer who also happens to be a friend. I have known Joel Burgess for many years, dating back to his time helping to design these big open-world RPGs for AAA studios. He currently serves as the studio head and co-founder of the indie studio Soft Rains, which has been preparing the debut of its first game, Ambrosia Sky. The elevator pitch is a sci-fi immersive sim in which you play as a death cleaner. If you imagine Powerwash Simulator spliced with BioShock, and then you add the NYTimes obituary section, then you're basically there. You also might remember that we chatted about this game earlier this year with guest Caitlin Tremblay, who is the writer of Ambrosia Sky. Anyway, this week, Ambrosia Sky Act 1 is hitting Steam. And I have been wondering, what does it feel like to launch a video game? Particularly as the head of a studio, someone who is responsible not just for the success of the game, but the business. The stress, the joy, the mixed sense of finishing one race and in this world of DLC and updates and additional acts, starting another marathon right away. Joel, doing me a solid in part, and I think also to preserve this very strange moment in his life, agreed to talk about all of that and so much more in this jumbo-sized Post Games episode. This week on Post Games, the agony and the ecstasy of releasing a video game in 2025. Act 1, the chaos of making video games in the 2020s. Act 2, the moment before pressing publish. Act 3, as always, the news of the week, and I have a very special Patreon bonus. Joel stuck around to talk about what he wished he had known before getting into running a video game studio, and also reflected on his career, including his dog's inspiration for dog meat in the Fallout series. We will talk about that and so much more, but I should be transparent with you. I like to keep episodes manageable so they don't accumulate in your backlog, but this episode, I felt it deserved the room to go a bit longer than usual. So what follows is a 50-minute conversation about the hard truths of pursuing your dreams, leaping off the ledge, and praying that there will be an audience waiting to catch you. Oh, hey there. One last thing. I am doing my Black Friday deal way before Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Super Tuesday or whatever. I'm doing an early bird deal. So between now and the 14th, basically you want to do this right before midnight on Thursday going into Friday, you can get the first month of Post Games on Patreon for a single $1. That is 25 incredible interviews with some of the most fascinating people in video games, 5 deep dives on storytelling, reviews, and media in video form. There's a huge audiobook version of my oral history of Street Fighter the movie. You get video episodes every week along with weekly bonus segments. And there's a whole bunch of cool people there just hanging out in the group chats that we have. It is a ridiculously good deal. I recommend you go check it out. It is at patreon.com/postgames. You don't need any special codes or any of that stuff. It's just the default for now till the 14th. Okay, now let's get back to the show. It is a new year and you want to eat better, but you still have no time to work with. You have no energy. You have so much going on in your life. What do? You do Factor. 2 minutes, real food, and you are done. You're not failing at eating healthy. You're failing at having 3 extra hours in every night. You're failing at not being a chef and wanting to do cleanup. Factor takes care of that. It has delicious food that is good for you. You got lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and none of the yucky stuff, no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners. It will offer you whatever you need to match your lifestyle. For me, Mediterranean diet, it really works well. But maybe you need something else, like a high-protein diet or GLP-1 support or ready-to-eat salads. Whatever it is, Factor wants to meet you on your page. Always fresh, never frozen, and like I said, ready in 2 minutes with no prep, no cleanup, just chill. I use Factor. I think that you should too. Head to factormeals.com/postgames, 50 off, and use code postgames50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for a year. Offer only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscriptions purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. Act 1, the chaos of making a video game in the 2020s. Today's guest is Joel Burgess, the studio head and co-founder of Soft Rains. Joel began his career in gaming in Texas, bouncing across the low to mid-budget fare that major publishers rarely bother with anymore, games like Blood Rain 2. In the mid-2000s, Joel moved to Bethesda Game Studios, where he eventually held various lead level design roles on the Elder Scrolls and the Fallout franchises. His dog, as I mentioned, is both the visual and spiritual inspiration for Dogmeat, something that he explains in detail in the bonus segment. After Bethesda, Joel served as the world director on Watch Dogs Legion, steered Capybara Games through the heart of the pandemic and the success of Grindstone, and almost 3 years ago to the day that you are hearing this, co-founded Soft Rains and began work on the game we're discussing today, Ambrosia Sky. A heads up about what you will hear: Joel and I actually met in person at a cafe in Koreatown, and I brought my Rode mics. You will hear the occasional radio passing car and a conversation mumble in the background. Hopefully it doesn't impede your enjoyment of this chat. I don't think it will, but I just don't want you surprised when you hear a Honda Civic honk briefly or the sound of some birds. Now, with all of that out of the way, let us get to it. You do Bethesda, you do Ubisoft, you do the indie studio, and then you think, you know what I want to do? I want to co-found a brand new studio right after or during the pandemic, I guess in that weird time there.
It all began in one form or another, like in, depending on where you draw the lines, like the latter days of the pandemic. Look, every budding game developer probably says, I want to start my own studio at some point, and like I had made sort of, and what's the word, like forays into considering it. And it's like, like it always like looked or smelled bad or whatever. Sometime in 2021, a friend of mine who I'd made in the industry, who had like made some career changes and was working more in the finance investment side of a company, like called me and it's like, look, I know you want to do this sort of thing one day. This is probably the time to do it. We are seeing investments being made. And like, he didn't put it this way, but I've kind of realized in retrospect that resumes like mine at that time were this commodity
You knew how to make a game. At least that was the perception.
Yeah. I mean, this is radio, I guess. So like the weird facial expression I probably made there might not have come across. Ostensibly, and to some extent, I think authentically, the experience mattered. I don't know where the cart and the horse is of like investors or platforms or publishers, but there was just like, yeah, like it was a commodities market for people with a certain level of experience. Just by, fortune and good circumstance, like I had a resume at that time that sort of fit the bill. I just wasn't out there like, I wasn't in entrepreneur mode. I've never been like, I never thought of myself like as an entrepreneur. I think I technically am now. So like this friend of mine basically is like, said you should turn on the entrepreneur light, and sort of put yourself out there. And, I saw advice from friends who had some success or done this sort of thing before. And a friend of mine gave me a piece of advice that I still actually think about this a lot and use, which is like, just like take the next call, take the next step until there's a reason not to, or there's no additional step to take. So, throughout like 2021, I started talking to some friends about maybe, hey, would you want to do something? Would you want to do something? How would you want to do it? Started talking to some of these folks who were like, just like getting to know people who were like in the investment community and like understanding what that was. Having like people ask me questions like, well, what's your cap table look like? And then having like rapidly Google what is a cap table, like, oh, okay, like I know nothing. Again, it's like late 2021, probably when I get that like phone call, which is like, you should be paying attention to this. I'm kind of slowly kicking the tires. I'm happy working at Cappy and like the stuff that we're doing. I'm excited about like what we are going to continue to do. And then in like 2022, these conversations about like possibly doing something like continue. And at some point in 2022, like I got serious about like, okay, like I have, a couple different ideas of like who I'd want to work with, like what founding would look like, what a company would look like, what kind of stuff we'd want to do. And I started pitching. And one of the things that I think stands in stark contrast to between like 2022 and 2025 is in 2022, if I was like taking a meeting and pitching like, I don't know, a VC fund, I was intentionally putting landmines in the pitch to sort of weed out investors that I probably wouldn't want to work with, rather than let's get to the Q&A part of a pitch meeting and be like asked about NFTs, or whatever, just like put it in the pitch. Like, hey, like we're interested in making single player things that don't have any Web3 component whatsoever. And it was a climate where, I had like maybe the naivety and the luxury of being able to like self-sabotage. If I was out there looking for money, I probably could have got a lot more money or offers of money like on the table by tailoring a pitch to the moment. But in that climate, I didn't have to do that, right? And like we were able to like have productive pitch conversations with like different kinds of money, right? Like I talked to a bunch of venture capital people, I talked to strategic investors and publishers, and at the end of the day, like had multiple offers of investment that were like very substantial, and like one in particular that we didn't take, like eye-wateringly substantial, and that kind of wound up, in an investment that we did go ahead with. It just at the very tail end of 2022, with a partner that we were able to do like very, like in very good sort of terms, you get something going so that we went into 2023, like, as a studio. And I had the sense at the time, and I think it's even more clear in retrospect, that like, in some ways it felt like we were jumping on one of the last boats leaving the pier of the like, yeah.
It reminds me of in that movie Twister, where they're shutting the hatch, right, as like the thing goes right over them, and it's like, we better hide down here for a while. So there are many hats that you wear. There are two big ones. There's the business, I need to run a studio hat. I need to make sure everyone's getting their paychecks met. There's also the, I'm going to design a game and that's why I'm doing this hat. Do you remember the maybe not the very first, but one of the earliest moments of conception for what would become Ambrosia Sky?
Ambrosia is extremely the product of like the time and the place and the people. It is not because I just feel like even when I'm in like in a pitch meeting, or if I'm like talking to, press, or, there's like an expectation that like, okay, here's a storyline. somebody with a certain level of experience has the thing that they wanted to make 20 years ago, and finally they can make it. And this is my vision from when I was 17. And that's not what Ambrosia Sky is. It never was. Once we were actually like, okay, this is the group that we're starting with. This is what we want to do. These are the things that we know we can do that give us confidence. These are the things that we're like a little bit scared of that we're interested in doing. Like Ambrosia Sky is not a game with a gun in it. I mean, as a, like the spray gun thing, but like there's no shotgun. You never get like a pistol or a harpoon or flamethrower or whatever. Well, you kind of get a flamethrower. It's an upgrade for that. Anyway, details. There's definitely a flamethrower actually. But like the most sort of cynical version is like we did the market research and like, we need to make a like, I don't know, right? Like a Dance Dance Tarkov because that's what the market is saying you have to make right now. And then you go and figure out a design for that. And so like we didn't do that, which might have been smarter. And then there was like the extreme like, pure art. And so like we weren't quite there either, but like we did have like this mishmash of things. And then like in the very early days of 2023, because we got to prototyping very quickly, we had this miasma of a bunch of different ideas of what we thought the character was and the world was that were like starting to lead to like moment-to-moment gameplay. So like we knew about the Death Cleaner thing very early on. And so it was really like probably sometime in those, maybe even those like first 3 months of 2023 is where like it transcended from shooting the shit, different ideas that we thought were like kind of cool to like, no, actually like I think I can see the beginnings of the game we're going to make. And it wouldn't be clear as it should be from that point at least a year, right? But I think like the beating heart of it was actually there really early on, and then maybe we got distracted or like explored other things, but like came back to a much more centered version of it later.
I don't want to make you sidetracked.
Yeah.
Quickly. What was the game that you wanted to make when you were 17?
Oh man, when I was 17, I know you're just like repeating the age I said, so I don't know if I should fixate too much on 17 versus 19 or 17 versus...
General area of totally.
Yeah. I don't know, like, I think superficially, because I didn't know I wanted to make games at that point. Like, first of all, like the late 90s was very much that, like, how many game developers of my age have you talked to were like, and then I realized people actually do this for a living, right? Like, so I was in that phase of like, I didn't really realize people did this for a living, but I was like, making like a text base, which I guess now would be like, it's funny because I wasn't into Pokemon, but I guess Pokemon was around at that time, but like like Pokemon Battler or like turn-based games like on a TI-83. I was like obsessed with games I remembered playing on like Apple IIc when I was like younger, and like there's a really cool one where you could like do a backward spin move and cut a guy's head off, and like I should make a game like that, right? But I don't know, like if somebody had said like, congratulations, you have a year to make a video game to me in like 1998 or whatever year, I would probably just made, actually, no, I do know. I do know. Here's the real answer. Me and my buddy Steve, the guy who like introduced me to the build engine, Duke Nukem 3D engine, him and I did like have a plan for a game we were going to make. And it was totally what a couple of 17-year-olds, it's like, we're going to like make maps that look, in retrospect, chillingly like our school.
Oh.
Because I think Columbine was like the next year, this conversation. But then we had all these like cool ideas for weapons, like, and then I think like Shadow Warrior got announced and came out a year later. And like half of like the weapons and the weird ideas that we had for our game were in Shadow Warrior. And it was that first moment, which I've seen dozens and dozens of these moments in my career since, of like somebody having like a game design idea or aspiration and seeing it pop up kind of in something else and going like, there is no career. There are no ideas. Nothing is new under the sun. Like despairing that somebody else thought of like a spray, like a hairspray flamethrower in a game.
So you talked about how you had that year where it isn't quite whatever it's going to be. What are some of the different directions that it goes?
2023 in some ways was like the best because our philosophy there was like, cool, we have the security of being able to like just make video game. Let's just put our heads down and make a video game. So like we're not going to squander, this is a derisive word, but like we weren't going to spend a bunch of time daydreaming, like we're going to download Unreal and we're going to play the game on Fridays. And like, the early playing the game on Fridays was very meandering and rough, but we made a choice not to like do a bunch of pitching or announced the game early, or like you really just kept our heads down and made the thing. So over the course of 2023, that was what it was. Like, we're going deep into story breaking and thinking about the character and the setting and the world. We're having our initial conversations about like music and like how music would be made by the people who lived here. So how that affect instrumentation, playing with the different systems that we thought would be cool, and then how would they be in service to each other. The game is like taking shape. I'm always hesitant to like, talk publicly about like things that didn't make into the game, because you don't want to pitch somebody like what would have been their favorite feature that got cut. We did this experiment where we were like, okay, because again, like we didn't know, and we weren't like philosophically 100% against the outcome where like there would be a gun in the game, right? Like, I don't know, maybe there'll be like, you'll have your thing, but there's like a full like Half-Life arsenal of guns in the game. So we're like, okay, well, let's do an experiment where like we had several systems that were working. We had like cleaning and the spraying. We had some of the grappling stuff, like basic physics objects tossing around. And so we, and the beginning of what would end up becoming the death rituals. So we wanted to play around with this idea of like, put Dahlia in a room where Dahlia's like, comes across a body and it's maybe like scanning or taking samples from the body. Again, like death rituals weren't really figured out at that point, but you're having this interaction with a body, and then like something scary happens and there's a shotgun. What would Dahlia do? And what we ended up doing was like, the scary thing happens and we actually just like have Dahlia like pick up the shotgun by the wrong end and like swing it, and like the shotgun breaks. There were elements of that encounter that, are either things that were like later realized like, we shouldn't do, or like we want to come back to later maybe. But it definitely proved to us like, oh yeah, like there's enough meat on the bone mechanically and thematically here that like we don't actually have to put a shotgun in the game. Yeah. And so like our character and also the setting, because it's not like a military base or something, it can be like very consistent with the idea that like we don't have to drop pistols, we don't have to drop space zombies or whatever in to like make, like hours of compelling story and gameplay content.
How many people are working on the game?
I mean, right now it's in like the neighborhood of 20 folks. Like I think if you were to kind of look in at the peak of people like touching the game at one point, maybe there were like 24. And that was like a fairly methodical build. Depending on like where you put your finger on the calendar in 2023, it's like, less than 10 people through most of, if not that entire year. I think this kind of goes back to like the business climate too, right? When we were pitching and getting advice also like after like starting the company, there was like a lot of very informed, well-meaning people who wanted the best for us, like telling us like, you should be scaling to like 50 people by the end of this first year.
What does that mean? Because I think a lot of people hear this and they're like 10 people, 20 people, 50, 100, 1,000. What is the difference?
I mean, there's definitely like an orders of magnitude thing there where it gets fuzzy, but I think like you have your kind of, you have your like micro solo, or like, I don't know if we want to like let's call like maybe a micro or super small indie, like 5 or 6 or fewer people, right? And to be fair, I haven't worked that way, right? Not like in any real way. So I don't know, right? Like I have friends who work that way and hear about the good and the ill of that. I have worked on, teams of around 100. I had one occasion to work on a team of around 1,000. Well, here, okay. Where are the meaningful like gaps? Say that you're in the like 20 or 30 range. At that range, you have enough folks that there is a level of specialization, right? I imagine if you're like a 3-person thing, like kind of everybody's doing a little bit of everything, you're wearing every hat. And maybe like one of those people can't do any code and one of those people can't do any art, but probably there's a lot of like overlap in the Venn diagram. When you're at like 10 or 20 people or 30 people, that still exists, but it's also possible to have like more specialization. Not to the level of like, this person only paints scales on the dinosaurs, but like, somebody who only does art or somebody who only does audio or whatever and doesn't really need to or have like a lot of occasion to like switch hats. And then when you get into like 100 people, specialization like becomes the default, right? And there are multi-classers, but those people either are really trying to be, or maybe they don't really want to be, with like this, victims of their own success of being like versatile. Maybe this is a quippier way of putting it. At the smallest level, like if we're talking like 30 people or fewer, specialization is the only way that it's possible to make a game. Once you're over, say, I don't know, a couple hundred, not specializing is like anathema. Like it will make it feel impossible, or maybe like practically be impossible, because when somebody is not specializing, when somebody is like trying to wear multiple hats, it actually like causes more chaos and more destruction.
Do you remember a moment where you're with your team and it has clicked? The thing that you all wanted to create was there in front of you for the first time?
Yeah, so I think for this, we're almost like we jump into 2024 in a way. Because the thing with 2023 was like, we have our heads down. Like, the game won't be announced until, like 2025. Not that we knew that then, but we knew it wasn't going to be announced like anytime soon. And like I'm doing, like some business and partner relationship type of like work, but, we haven't like shown the game to anybody in any real way. But at the start of 24, right, like the DICE conference is like the first time that like I go to DICE and I show like the pitch deck with some like concept art, and like a very, very small amount of like gray box, like gameplay, like GIFs maybe on slides, to, like platform partners and publishers and stuff like that to start like getting a feel. One thing that I really do legitimately like about like pitching and those kinds of conversations, it's like it's this truth-telling serum. Like if in order to make a compelling pitch, I have to like fabricate, then like something is amiss, right? And I've definitely seen that happen. And where folks go and pitch and then figure out how to like make the game fit the pitch later. So like I'm preparing for pitching the game formally, even just at like the concept level, right? It's like, it sort of took a lot of the like, okay, cool. Like 2023 had like basically like a full year to like, kind of play around, not make sound too cavalier. And then like, how do I then condense this into like a 20-minute or 30-minute pitch and conversation for like a platform partner? And so when I say it's like a truth-telling serum, it's just like, hey, like, I know who I'm going to be talking to from like platform X. So like, I think in order to make this connect with, him or her, like, I really want to be able to like speak to this, but like, that's not really the game we're making. How do we reconcile that? And sometimes it's a matter of like, oh, the messaging is wrong. And sometimes it's actually like a good spotlight of like, actually, yeah, like that probably should be a true statement about the game. And like, we sort of figure it out. Prepping for like the DICE and GDC first part of 2024 was one of the first times where we had like a really constructive, self-imposed, but like an external pressure to be able to give an honest and transparent pitch about what we were making. And that really begins like November of 2023, like looking ahead to DICE, starting to set meetings and da-da-da-da-da-da. We also we called it the 5-10 demo, which is basically like, it's a 5 to 10 minute part of that demo. And the 5-10 was basically like, you come out of an airlock and like you open an airlock door and like fungus kind of grows out. And then like you go down a hall and fungus is like covering lights and stuff. And then you do, this interaction that like bears quite a lot of resemblance to like the death rituals as they are. This was like maybe March. Let's call it March of 2024. We were like doing one of our Friday team play tests and, it's remote teams. We're like on, Zoom or whatever. And we are playing through the 5-10. And it was the first time we're like, and again, it's all gray box and it's just like a literally faceless like robot mannequin from the Unreal like default assets. But it's like the first time that it had like some of Greg's music with like Michelle's work on top of that and with Kate's writing with like text to speech, like placeholder dialogue or whatever. And it plays and like a few like cameras turned off on the call and like realized people on the team were crying. And it's like, oh shit, okay, like, so yeah, I think actually probably in retrospect, that was probably like the moment.
What's keeping you up at night?
I mean, like everything, like there are the sort of the joyous, mundane practicalities of prepping a game for release, right? Like there's last minute hot fixes, anxiety over like, did I break that? Like, very low level, like the game stuff. Like there's also like the work of making games that is like getting press codes and distributing those, and which of these emails from influencers are real and which of these are like key farmers. But all that is like, not to sound too, flip, but like stuff that I've done before and been involved before. And one of the things that's great about Soft Rains is like, we have like really, really smart, savvy, like we're able to spread the load of that work in a way that I think rivals even AAA teams I've been on. So like, I'm not being kept up at night too much about the logistics of getting the game ready for like this, this Act 1 launch on the 10th, which depending on when you run this, maybe it's the 10th or it's in the past. But I'm anxious, but it's just work. Like I am supremely confident in this team that like we're professional and we can do the work and respond to the things that inevitably will go wrong along the way the next couple of weeks as we prep for launch and go through launch and all of that. There's of course the like, I try not to do this too much. The like indie devs, honestly, AAA devs too, like biting their fingernails to the quick over like, how are our impressions? How are our wish lists? How are our, this and that, like whatever metrics. But there's also an element of like, it's going to do what it's going to do. The plans that you've made are plans that like, for the most part, you made and put into motion like weeks or months ago. And so you're just like riding that through. I'm thinking a lot about like, do people show up? Do people play the game? How many other demands are on people's time? How do we like, I don't know, like how do we meet the moment that we've tried to create for ourselves by making something like that's weird in 2025?
Well, yeah, let's walk our way to the moment a little bit. Over the past year, we've been chatting about this a little bit. You've been considering different ways to release the game. Is it early access? Do you pursue more funding? When is the right time to launch? I think is a thing that I know has been on your mind.
Yeah.
Can you walk people through your thought process to how you landed here?
I mean, in some ways, at the risk of being too much of a digression and maybe just too much overall, like it's best to wind the clock all the way back to like 2024. Like I'm trying to figure out like where to sort of throw the dart at the calendar, because it's like, and to me, even like, it's not even the end of 2025 yet. And 2024 feels like it's 5 different years. In February, I'm showing people a deck with concept art only for the first time. And over the course of like, let's call it the first like half of 2024, we're building the game, we're making forward progress. One of the things that we were doing, which like in some ways came from experience, and that experience in some ways I think created like a naivety, was we weren't trying to dog and pony show, right? Like we weren't doing the things that I knew from other, like not just indie, like indie and AA and AAA developers were like the right things to do, of like making a beautiful corner and vertical slice. Like we're going to save ourselves a lot of the dog and pony show and just make the game rather than like optimize for the next publisher meeting or for an investor meeting. We also were keeping our heads down in 2024 by not announcing the game, really, really early to like see how it did, to start building like wish lists. Because that's like the correct thing to do. The advice that anyone who wants an indie developer making a new IP to do well would tell them is like announce as early as possible, start building wish lists as early as possible, yada, yada. And we didn't do any of that in 2024 for like a bunch of reasons. One of the things as well was like at the start of 2024, I'm looking at the business climate and I'm looking, like the signs are there, right? We were talking about like kind of the last stock sleeping station that like there might be like a dip, and we also might be like in the dip, and then you don't know how far the hill goes down, but like you're on a slope. So as we're like firming up the game through the prototyping and the pitching and all the like forward progress, I'm also like pitching to partners and getting a vibe for how things are. And you're starting to see those signs. And like without saying anything specific about like our game and our budget, like In 2021, you pitch a $20 million game, and like you should be pitching a $50 million game, right? And then in 2025, and definitely at the beginning of 2024, it's like, whoa, you're asking for a $1 million game. It's like, like it's the same. So, like the winds, they were shifting for sure. And so over the course of 2024, there's an element of like, hey, is this a game that we're going to make like with a publisher or with like additional investment? Is this a game that we self-publish? And, you could imagine like a filing drawer full of like plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and like, where is like fully independent self-publishing in that? Is it plan A or is it plan Z or somewhere in between? It felt at the start of 2024 like, oh, like it could be somewhere in that file. It's somewhere in that file folder, but it's not necessarily like plan A, because there's like lots of, options or interest or traction, even though like the field is narrowing. And over time, right, that metamorphosized into was like coming away from some of the conferences and like, like September timeframe of 2024 was like, I'm going to go ahead and say we should fully put self-publishing in the front of the filing cabinet. We should make that plan A. And we're going to spend the last few months of 2024 really taking a look at what we've built and saying like, if we, like, and in some places it required like reimagining, but I would say nowhere did it require reinvention, right? So then we're jumping to 2025. We've done that experiment, right? We're like, we've sort of done that reimagine, not reinvent. It's like, okay, like this is not just like the same game or it's actually like a better version of like a more focused version of the game where it's like, it's almost like, it's almost annoying if you go to like a GDC talk or read an article or somebody's like, and we just, everything seems obvious in retrospect, but it was like when we kind of cut the, the cords of the parachute of like, somebody's going to come and throw a bunch of money at us so that we can do blank. Now it's like, okay, well, the game actually, like some of the problems we had of like, what are we really doing? Is that, and it's like the game loop and everything like became like much more clearer under sort of that pressure of like, what if we can't or don't grow the team so that we can like be more sustainable for more time and all that. And so then like we believe in this like tighter version of the game and going into 2025. We've played it. We're continuing to have like conversations about, publishing or additional financing. My like belief in different conversations ebbs and flows, right? But we then get into a window, and you know how these things work, right? Like you don't like decide on a Monday that you're gonna like reveal the game as part of a showcase, and then the showcase on Friday. Like you got to start throwing those balls 3 months in advance, minimum in a lot of cases. So we knew that like, the summer is a big beat where there's a lot of different events, and we we were fortunate that we had a couple of events that were willing to have us, and we were fortunate that we had to choose. And so, like there's also, this is a bit of an aside, but there are certain biz dev conversations that I knew announcing the game would take off the table because, like depending on who you're talking to, like they want that announcement, they want to make that plan, they want that moment, they want their logo on the thing, and it's hard to unring the bell. And so there was like an element of risk of like, by announcing the game, we're going to take some of those like potentially really good partnerships off the table, but like we also have to like excuse the expression like shit or get off the pot. And so it's like we had a really good opportunity to have the game included in the PC gaming show. We ended up getting the lead slot after the pre-show, which was like incredible for us for like a new, like unusual IP from like a self-published team. We got to show the game at Summer Games Fest in like the physical location here in LA. And we just made, right? Like we just made the most of that beat that we could, but that also like put us on the like, okay. And now now the game is announced. Now everything that we say about the game, like it's visible.
You went with the ACT model. What does that get you? Like, what does it get you versus, again, a more traditional funding model?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the things it does in very practical terms is that, like, it gives the game a revenue model, right? Like, there is a thing that people can go and purchase on November 10th and, like, show support for the game. And, like, that is a financing model. Guess what? that's how a lot of things in the world are financed, is like somebody hands money for the thing that they would like to enjoy. So, importantly, it is that. It also, and I think this is where like there is overlap with early access. It gives you the LinkedIn speak version of it is market validation, and the human way of saying it is like we get to see how people respond to it, right? So one of the differences from like releasing, like Act 1, 2, 3 as like, a single package is you don't get the ability to like respond to feedback, right? To see what people do. So, it's the sort of thing where it's like a YouTube comment isn't going to make us put purple unicorns in the game. Like here's a practical thing. Like the game has like the two things I think we've gotten like really, like encouraging positive attention for are like the death rituals, and like the voice acting is now there, which I think helps them quite a lot. And then we've also had people respond a lot to like the sort of systemic, immersive simi, like, possibility space of the game as well. And with the act structure, we have the ability, to be like, oh, actually, like, the death rituals are not landing as well as we thought. And like, so maybe like we'll focus like less on that in Act 2 than we were otherwise going to, or Act 3 than we were otherwise going to, and more on like the MSIM stuff because that's what we were, or maybe the inverse is totally true. And so you still have that like agility, and you have that flexibility to like be designing with that stuff in mind.
I call you in 2 months. The game has been launched. It's been out for a while, and you have the best news to tell me about how it is going. What are you telling me?
There's a world in which the best news could be we launched Act 1, and that actually like jostled loose some partner conversation that like we'll be able to like take a really ambitious approach to how we're going to like proceed in 2026 with like Act 2 and Act 3. And yeah, this like imagined, partnership or whatever, like this sort of like external financing thing that I'm pretending has happened in this scenario, has like happened in such a way that like, we're able to relax and just make the game and not have like a lot of the like the outside pressure of like how's it doing, and like are we doing the right thing, and do we have to change or pivot or this or that, and all that like stress and tension that comes with like I think inherently being independent. Then there's the flip side of the coin in the like this is great news scenario, which is like we don't need that to happen or to have happened because like players have just showed up in a way where the Act 1 is doing great. Players are playing it, like it's generating revenue. We're able to be independent and not only be able to continue making, this, because some other like source of financing has come. Maybe it's a blend of those things, but yeah, I think that those paths are both,
Okay, I call you the same time of the year, but now you are having the worst Christmas ever. Things have gone so terribly wrong. What does that sound like?
I mean, I'm doing some like napkin math in my head here, but I had one of these conversations which like, in a way it was so disheartening that it almost wrapped around to like almost a nihilism of like, even, so I was talking to, up here, and they were like talking about like wish list numbers, and like their wish list numbers for their project are like astronomically good, right? Like the numbers where like the publishers call you don't, like and like they felt terrible. They felt like really, really like bleak about, and because their situation was different, where like the level that they had to hit was so high that, and it just sort of put a thing in there of like, okay, like if they have like those metrics and these things going for them, and they're still not like able to relax, and like, I guess there's really no point in giving myself an ulcer. Because you're just out there doing like making the best thing that you can, treating people the best that you can. And like, it's whatever happens is going to happen, which maybe sounds a little bit like, I don't know, helpless.
You, like right now, when we're talking, are on the cusp of shipping this game. You are also someone who I know very much values a humane workplace. You also have the reality of shipping the game with a very small team. How do you balance that? How do you balance that desire to not have a team that is crunching all the time with the reality of this really real deadline?
Yeah. I mean, we have a team, like it's a bit of a self-selecting dynamic, I guess, in terms of like who we are, who chose to like come be part of it, and like the, you know, the expectations and the culture that people bring. Like, you know, the culture is not a thing that there's a one of my colleagues says it in a good way that I haven't pulled out my pocket in a while, right? But like, culture isn't a thing that you like define. It's a thing that you just observe and measure. And so like, you know, I was just like looking at our Slack today while I'm like away from home and not really like able to be in the conversation. And I see like a conversation where people on the team are like, hey, like this last build lock off that we did like was bumpy in these ways. And like, we are going to like change when we lock the build. So that's like earlier in the week, so that like when we have one that goes rocky, it doesn't mean that like so-and-so is working on Saturday or whatever the case may be. So for the most part, I think like folks are really taking it upon themselves to keep each other accountable for not just like solving problems with like working, you know, too much. Like I'm intermittently probably one of the worst people on the team for like doing that with or like using that tool for myself, which I feel like is probably perennially true of a lot of, I don't know, old timers. But yeah, I mean, like there's enough psychological and emotional pressure on people that the physical pressure of crunch is like so deleterious that like, I think there's just like a really strongly instilled awareness in the team that like working extra hours is like not a sustainable solution anyway. It's like a short-term solution. So I was gonna say I'm sure it's happening. I know it's happening in pockets, but it's very much a working culture where like it's not even like it's just as suffused in there. Like when people see the evidence of somebody doing it, like it can get called out in kindly and gentle ways and often like in private, but like people are getting called out for using hours as a solution to a problem and then like try and find like a different way to solve the problems. So
For you, I mean, you've done all the different types of work in the games industry. You've done the really big studios, you've done the smaller ones, you are now responsible for your own. Why do you keep doing it?
Yeah, why? I can't put my finger on like when or why, but there's a point at which like I think one of the things I decided I cared about was like trying to put other people in a position to like do things or succeed. And so like, I mean, I said this like, you know, an hour ago whenever we first started talking, like I think every like young, remotely ambitious like game developer at some point is like, I'm going to run my own studio and do my own games or whatever. It's like, and I was no different in that way. But like when I actually got into some positions where like I had like a little bit of leadership or a little bit of authority, a little bit of like elbow room, I was getting a lot more satisfaction out of using that power to like, you know, shoulder somebody else into the tractor beam of it. And I think like Soft Drains in a lot of ways has been a chance for me to like, I mean, look, like Soft Drains is like, it's a co-founded studio. It's not like it's not Joel Burgess Co. or anything like that. But you know, to some degree, I have been able to leverage my experience or reputation or resume, which is like only maybe 10% deserved and 90% circumstantial and like luck anyway, to create opportunities for like other people. And I have this like, so it gets a little like, I don't know, like philosophical or cosmic, but I have this thing that I think about a lot more these days. Like, this job is hard. This job also like has forced me and like, you know, some of my colleagues into like really hard decisions that like involve like, you know, outcomes that could be really depressing or inequitable or like feel unsavory. And I do have this like steering belief that's kind of come into form, particularly in these last like 3 years, that like the fact that it's hard and the fact that like it's going to put you in positions that test your principles, and maybe occasionally like you feel like you have to like wrinkle your nose and like, you know, there's no good path, but this is the best of bad, is exactly the reason why like the people who should take those spaces are the ones who have that discomfort. Because if they don't, people who have no compunction about like difficult decisions or like unsavory outcomes, like they will occupy that space. And so like, I think that's part of why I'm doing it. It's maybe out of spite.
I think I might know the answer here, but do you ever miss working at a big publisher or studio?
I mean, honestly, yes. But why? Like, there are times that I miss being able to just like go into my cave for an extended period of time and just like make stuff. There are times that like, you know, the monkey's paw of like, I wish I was in the loop on everything and I knew all the circumstances that were guiding the decisions being made. Is like, oh no. Like it's hard to like pull yourself out of the headspace of like, oh yeah, now I am in the loop on basically, you know, everything. Well, which is not entirely true, but like, so I do sometimes, I think, like pine for being able to sort of like just focus on like the making of the thing. I've also kind of come to peace with that a bit, in that like, I think it's like a romantic thing. Like, you know, like, look, like the period of time that I was at Bethesda, like, if I could go back to that time and place and those people and that, like, you know, like awesome. Like, those were amazing years and amazing, like, partnerships and camaraderie. And of course the outcomes were like awesome and amazing. But it's also true that like I've changed and the industry has changed and like the places have changed and people have moved on and you know, so, I don't know if I would go back to AAA. I don't think I wouldn't, but I'm not sending resumes. Like I, yeah.
Game launch, do you?
Yeah. No, I think I don't sit around and miss working in AAA. But that is not to besmirch the AAA. Like, you know, I was having an unrelated conversation with a friend, like I think this week, and I think one of the things about like AAA, and this is kind of like, again, like the monkey's paw of like, I wish I knew why my boss has made this decision that affected me in this negative way, is the more, I don't know, senior I've gotten in my career and the closer I've gotten, the more transparency I've gotten to like how decisions are made. When you're, you know, whatever, like further down the totem pole or whatever you want to say about it, right? Like, you kind of imagine that like there's an order and there are rules and like there's like a lot of like thoroughness and thought. And in fact, it's mostly chaos and randomness. And then like, I think in any sufficiently like complicated or large moving like project or structure, the things that influence things become so inscrutable that like it effectively feels random. And there's a way to interpret that which is kind of cynical and nihilistic. And there's a way to interpret that too, which is like kind of gives grace of like, hey, like your boss in that, you know, environment or the person making decisions in that AAA, like may not actually have been trying to achieve this like evil or duplicitous or slimy outcome. Like they may have been trying everything in their power to avoid it, and they like failed, or they didn't see it coming, or something else happened. And like, I think it's a slippery slope too, where it comes to like truly terrible things can happen and everyone is blameless. But
why should people play Ambrosia Sky right now?
It is, I think, an utterly unique thing that manages to also be familiar and relatable. And like, I hope that speaks to people who want to come to it for like gameplay. And I hope it speaks to people who want to come to it for art, because there are a lot of games. There are a lot of wonderful games, well executed games. There are a lot of games that are authentically trying new things. I think one thing that we've done with this project, right, exists in this like impossible equilibrium of those, is like, if you've played and love immersive sims, like we're bringing some of that, right? If you really love games with like, a unique art style or like deeply unique like world building, like we bring some of that. And so from a pure like, are there elements of games and experiences that you have loved that are in our game that you get to experience in like a fresh setting? Come and play it for that. But then there's also the like, it is an unusual game, but it's like occupies a space that I have found in a way that we didn't design for. Maybe we did subconsciously, really universally relatable. And, I've gotten this comment too, and maybe it's true, and maybe it's just speaking to like, the age that we are at, but like death and grief and loss and like, survivor's guilt and remorse. If you haven't experienced it yet, you will. And there are beautiful games that speak to these things, but there's not a lot of them as part of that conversation. And we've wondered at times too, whether Ambrosia should be less concerned with gameplay and less concerned with fun and puzzle solving. I think it's part of the pacing. Ambrosia Sky that was like just a series of death rituals, I think would still be a great thing to do. But I think it's not just about sort of like broadening the tent of who could play it. It is that, but it's also, I think, like those moments, like the cleaning gameplay encourages you. I mean, I talk about like super early days pitches. I would talk about this in pitching the game. It's like, you know this about me. Like I've been primarily a level designer my whole career. And if you're a level designer working on most games and you want to create a moment of like high intensity and high action, oodles and oodles of tools to do that with the combat encounters and explosions and traps and, and all this stuff. If you want to create a moment of reflection or awe or introspection, you can't do that systemically, really. Like, I'm going to do a beautiful vista that like an artist is going to realize, or like a really like evocative, like piece of dialogue. Like, it's always bespoke, and without, again, designing for it, but kind of discovering through the process with like Ambrosia was like, oh wait, like the sort of like cleaning gameplay and like, it gives, like me as a level designer and us as a team, like a systemic way to sort of put you into that like tunnel vision zen of like, oh, I'm going to like kind of clean all this. And then like, when something, exciting or scary or surprising or sad happens, like it exists in a continuum with that sense of pacing. It's like, oh wait, now like for maybe legitimately like the first time in my career as a level designer, I'm able to like push both of those buttons in a systemic way that doesn't require me to like, craft or that's a totally bespoke thing or collaborate with somebody on the team to like make a totally bespoke thing. I think it's like good with Ambrosia Sky that we stuck to like trying to make it a like first-person adventure game with a lot of the staples of like crawling through a vent and, like system puzzles, and then having like the death rituals and the cleaning and all that. And I don't know, I guess this is my brazen pitch to the listener or whatever, is like, I think people should play the game because it's supporting this kind of thing existing. Like all of the wisdom for a team like ours over the past 2 years, right? In which the wisdom has changed from you should make more expensive games to like, oh my gosh, you should make much less expensive games. But like, it is such a climate of fear. It is such a climate of risk that well-meaning advice pushes teams towards you should copy the thing that came before that is more successful, or you should work really hard to attach that IP that people have heard of before. Or you should do all these like Ambrosia Sky in a lot of ways is a refusal to de-risk a project. Like, no, it's going to be original IP. No, it's going to have this like sort of, imperfect main character. It's gonna, have this like immersive semi, really hard to debug and make work and performant like system. Like almost every decision we made could kill us. And we did it anyway. And part of the bet of that is there are a lot of people who, bless them because they're doing it for the right reasons, but are making decisions about game design out of fear for the product. And we had the luxury in a lot of ways, and maybe we had the naivety in a lot of ways to not do that. And the result of that is Ambrosia Sky. And that's why in this environment where we have such a glut of games, I don't see a lot of games that have the same DNA that we have. And I think I hope people find that it's worth supporting so that not just we can do it, so that others can do it too.
The Patreon bonus, a life in games, a dog in games. Joel was a good sport and with the help of some milk tea managed to muscle through a meaty bonus segment. We chatted about what he wishes he'd known before co-founding a game studio, his guidance for game design newcomers, his own long career in big budget and indie game studios, and we go very, very, very deep on how his late dog inspired not just the look of dog meat in Fallout 4, but the canine character's personality. For everybody else, you will want to stick around, because the news of the week is egg. Good egg. Evil egg. Dark Souls egg. Robotron egg. What do I mean? That is an excellent question, and I will answer it right after this break. Act 3, the news of the week. Plenty of stuff happened this week in the world of video games, but only one word matters most, and that is egg. Players can play not one free game about egg, but 2 free games about egg. First up, Egg. Available on itch.io. Egg is the latest game from the brilliant Terry Kavanagh, a game designer that typically prioritizes skill, reflexes, and strategy over, silly things like narrative, dialogue, and plot. His early work, VVVVVVV, and Super Hexagon are riffs on Atari Age platformers and reflex games. More recently, he released Dicey Dungeons, which, honestly, if you need a game to consume your entire Thanksgiving holiday this year, let me tell you, Dicey Dungeons, it's happy to do it. Egg, the newest game, is a further evolution of his interest. Imagine Super Mario 64 meets Dark Souls. Now subtract all of the enemies, make the entire game about jumping, and make the jumping really tough. Also, you're an egg. For people watching the video version of the episode, you will have already seen the appeal or the repulsion of Egg watching me struggle for minutes to accomplish the simple task of climbing steps that Mario would scale in a second. It is an evil little egg game. However, it is not Evil Egg. Evil Egg is a free, old-school arcade game, ironically reminiscent of the early games of one Terry Kavanagh. If you have played twin-stick shooters like Geometry Wars or Robotron, then you're familiar with the general concept here. You are a little ship in a square, static space. You must kill all of the enemies as they come, wave after wave. You collect little green fellows who give you various upgrades, and you get bonus weapons like a shotgun or a sword. And then, once you've completed a room, you pick from 3 more rooms, each with different enemies and potential rewards, and you go and you go and you go until you die, and then you start all over. It is a very familiar formula, the twin-stick shooter meets roguelike, but big differences. For starters, again, free. Second, the graphics are truly chaos. Imagine something that you would see in the Atari arcade days, and then run it through a mix of hallucinogens and abstract art. And 3, did I mention it's free? 2 free, wonderful egg games. Sure, other stuff happened. The Simpsons is in Fortnite. There is a free Battle Royale version of Battlefield. And, you know, stuff's always happening. There are games coming out in the middle of the fall. But, like, none of that matters. Because egg. And that is the news of the week. And that is a wrap. We have learned what it is like to launch a video game in the age of too many games. Short answer, pretty damn stressful. Long answer, just listen to the past 90 minutes or whatever. Next week, the scariest game I played this fall was not a horror game. Cave Crave is a new VR game for MetaQuest and PSVR 2 in which players navigate tight, pitch-black caverns squeezing between itty-bitty cracks. In the core game, players scrabble through fictional caves full of creepy crawlies, but what shocked me appeared just a few weeks ago. A free, quote, tourist mode in Cave Crave, where players can clutch and crawl through a recreation of the real and infamous Nutty Putty Cave. If you have ever found yourselves in the most morbid corners of YouTube, maybe you're already familiar with this story. In the early 2000s, a 20-something spelunker took a wrong turn in the Nutty Putty Cavern, squeezed through a hole and down a 90-degree vertical shaft, and he did not return. When the rescue service failed to retrieve the body, local leaders decided to plug the entrance with cement, ignoring some local pushback. Now, video game players can visit a recreation of this cavern-turned-tomb, which raises all sorts of questions about games, recreation, true crime, and what exactly makes art terrifying. I chat with the CEO of 3R Games about all of that and so much more. But for now, a reminder, post-game supporters get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern at the latest, pretty much always before that. They get extra acts and bonus materials. They get a version of the show in video, along with the games of the week that you can watch while you are watching me do the thing that I'm doing right now. This week, Patreon listeners got an extra long conversation with Joel about dog meat and a life in video games. Plus, they just got access to the latest episode of Video Game Journalism 101, a video series that has adapted my college-level course on video games, storytelling, reporting, and the media. The latest episode explains why story matters, how you can tell stories in ways that excite and interest people, and how you can see the invisible pieces that are propping up the stories that you love or that you hate. And no ads on anything. Subscribe to that Patreon at patreon.com/postgames. Subscribe to the newsletter for free at post.games. Post Games logo by the brilliant James Barham. Theme by Mark Sparling, and a special thank you to this week's guest, my friend Joel Burgess. Like the show, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It really does help the show out. You know what also helps the show out? Just telling a friend. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.